Before we begin with our opening, I want to acknowledge the chiefs that are here. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here. I also want to impress upon the assembly. Our chiefs are very busy. I thank them every time that they take some time out of their schedules to be here. But our chiefs have a responsibility and an obligation to the assembly. They're also part of their other organizations like MKO and SCO. They're part of their tribal councils. We also require them to be active and participate in our education initiatives, our health initiatives, a whole myriad of things. So we keep our chiefs busy, and that it's very hard for them to dedicate large portions of time. But chiefs. With that said, chiefs, I thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. Chief councils and proxies as well, and. With that said, we'll get underway with our opening, and we'll carry on. So I'll give the microphone back to our MC. So we go sige na skulit na gumagana.
Thank you, Grand Chief. So I think we're going to be proceeding with the grand entry. So I'm going to ask all the chiefs in attendance to start making their way to the eastern doorway to my left here. We'll be calling upon the Long Plain Drum Group. They'll be giving us a song. They've been waiting for a while to entertain us here. So if I can humbly ask all the chiefs to make their way to the eastern doorway to my left. The elders are more than welcome to join them as well if they feel like doing so. So once again, the elders that are willing to go up and walk in the flags as well. We've got a lot of information to be shared today amongst the people in attendance, the chiefs in attendance. Again, to some of the spectators in the back, to proceed with the assembly, we need quorum, which is 32. That's why we've been waiting for a while. In case you didn't know, just letting you guys know. Okay, I think I got the high sign from over there. All right, boys, give a grand entry there. Keeshkeemaquah First Nation to give us our opening prayer.
Amigos, ako'y ungamin na kuma gamma jiamwate. Chigo paglan gamya na kunigea. Ami san skapi jimini goizian. Agi jema do pinigo na challenge gains ruminacion. Agi to no jimna kan swedish ni anji kenama pede jotana jimini goizian. Angami nak mag no gima kan gami gai to. Chimu chaka to adu gitonya. Chimu segito chimu set to. Ami otni gangani chimachain. Kenda maling at yung lasing missiones. Siguro ako mga kami ay yung mga kinalimangan naman. Kami kasi kaya ito yung mga minutigo yung mga kanak ko tumitong tayo siya. May tsaka ito nagigito yung missiones. Siguro ako mga kami ay nakdami kinagay mga kami kaya ito. Good morning chiefs, good morning grand chiefs. It's an honor again to say a few words on behalf of the pipe that was introduced this morning. And also the songs that are introduced this morning. As you all know, the pipe ceremony represents our nationhood and our sovereignty and who we are as Anishinaabe people. I think from the time of the treaties, the pipes were used to declare our nationhood, so that's what we're doing here this morning. So with that, may the Creator bless you and guide you in our deliberations for our children. Keeshkeemaquah.
Great. Chiefs and Assembly, I'll ask if you could be seated back to your seats promptly. Once again, welcome to everyone in attendance for the AMC Chiefs Assembly with focus on Jordan's principle and health. It's always an honor to be asked to co-chair in regards to the assembly. I'm going to be calling upon our host Chief Dennis Meachus from the Long Plain First Nation to give us some opening remarks. I'd like to commend him on the beautiful community that he represents here. Beautiful people and the beautiful land that's here with us.
Yeah.
How about you? So what make you this week? I was gonna see it with that. Okay, get the knock on up, get in. Well, got me. Now we out to shame I do. You jogging? What can I see? Should go. You jogging? I got knock on what? Hey, watch. You go get here. Okay, you can okay, mat. Okay, you dog. Got the indication what? Where no room where to. Well, Joe Nation should be a mad definition of it. You get up to Nation where I give me a woman. Well, Nation of that make a nun. Oh, you can't have been. The show us an anak local, Nana Glaze, you go gaggy, the mads yard, Gaggy Bomusayat, Ma acting. You give me a woman where I need wait, she should be a tradition of it. Friends, relatives, it's a beautiful day. I want to acknowledge all of you, and thanks to the opening prayers, our Elder Dave Daniels has given us a beautiful prayer. drum long playing singers for the beautiful songs. Of course, I chose to sing with the drum. Singing is really it's part of who I am as a Anishinaabe, and I'm very thankful. My grandfathers, my grandmothers were all well-known singers. And I acknowledge the Eagle staffs that have come in, our Mugichdak and our leaders. Thank you very much, Norman Peters, Dave Daniels, and all the leadership that has come in this morning. So we're, again, Long Plain, we're very honored to host the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. We acknowledge our Grand Chief, Arden Dubas, for choosing to come back to Keeshkeemaquah. We're always very, very honored to offer our facilities here at Keeshkeemaquah for events for Indigenous people. And we hope that will continue as we go forward. Of course, we have a lot of plans for Long Plain and Treaty 1 in particular. And on behalf of the Treaty 1 Chiefs, I also want to welcome you all to Treaty 1 territory. This area is a very historic place. Many of you know it's the site of an Indigenous residential school that was in operation from early 1900s. And this land was acquired by one of our former chiefs, who's also with us today, Ernie Daniels. And so we're working towards a lot of a repatriation of who we are as Anishinaabe people, repatriation of our culture, our language. Of course, we're all on a healing journey, and we're working hard to come together as Anishinaabe people and to strengthen our relationships with our brothers and sisters across this beautiful country we call Canada. I do want to, I was asked to mention on June 21st, very important day, summer solstice. There's a recommendation from Chief Hudson, and we are planning to host a gathering on that day at Cap Yong. We're still working out the details of what that'll look like, but it'll be a traditional powwow that we're hoping to host on June 21st at the Cap Yong. Also, of course, August 3rd is a very August 3rd is a very, very important day for Treaty 1. And we signed our treaty in 1871, and we're approaching our 150th anniversary within the next few years. So we do have a lot of things happening with the Treaty 1, and we see that, or witness that's also taking place with our other treaty brothers and sisters in different treaty groups. So we welcome that. I think the push is on for Indigenous governments and to strengthen our identity and our work that we need to do. Of course, we always look at things more a holistic approach on how we face challenges today in our First Nation communities, and we're working to address those. And I know many of us are, we're quite versed in different venues and different streams, such as economic development. Some of us pay more attention to different things, such as what I just stated. I know Long Plain is pushing hard on economic development initiatives through our urban reserves. We feel that going on that track would also benefit the social programming we do, the social card spending that we do within our First Nation communities. But we recognize the challenges that on the ground we're faced with, and we're thankful we have programs such as Jordan's Principle, and I acknowledge all of the people that are working in that particular field. We also acknowledge all the good work that's being done in the health field, and we thank you for all being here, our friends that are coming together to share and to create awareness and education for one another to advance our cause going forward. So I just wanted to say that on behalf of Long Plain people, our elders, our council. Again, we're very honored to have Assembly Manitoba Chiefs here today. We are looking forward to host in the future in Winnipeg. We are working on conference centers, hotels, and not only at Long Plain in the Madison Reserve, but eventually Treaty 1, Cap Young. So there's a lot of work to look forward to, and I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities to strengthen who we are, to move forward, to repatriate our identity as Anishinaabe people, Dakota people, Cree people, Dene people. We're all in this together, and there's a lot of work to continue. On the ground, we're facing a lot of challenges, as stated, with drug addiction, drug crisis. It's almost like we're in crisis management a lot of times, but we can't lose the faith of the work that we're undertaking, trying to do to try and better ourselves, our families, and our communities. So that's all for now. I thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the next few days, and I hope that we're able to, as we come together, work towards solving our challenges that we face. Keeshkeemaquah.
Thank you, Chief Meaches. Next, I'd like to call upon Grand Chief Warren Dumas of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We'll let our talented singers get out of the... Thank you for the beautiful songs. We'll see you later today or tomorrow. Okay, você pagou na pigis fan nas kumon. Kagado te pi tuhti pi sitos kauya. Well, you see that neta tuslimi na agi media da tuskata ma nas kumon. So, on behalf of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, I'd like to send a warm welcome to everyone who's gathered here today for our Assembly on Jordan's Principle and a little bit of health. I want to acknowledge Elder Harry Bone for the prayer, as well as Elder Ernie Daniels and Dave Daniels for coordinating the pipe ceremony and singing us songs to start our day. And I also want to acknowledge the drum group for singing their beautiful songs. And I also want to acknowledge our host Chief Dennis Meaches and his community for allowing us to assemble on their lands in Long Plain First Nation. I always appreciate the warmth and the hospitality when I come here. And I always have a special place for this for this hall, because when I first became chief, this is where I came to my first AMC assembly, so it has a special place for me. I'd also want to acknowledge our Grand Chiefs, Garrison Settee and Grand Chief Daniels. I spoke with them. They will be making their way as we go on over the next couple of days, but they're here in spirit, but they will be, and as well as our regional chief. I'm glad that he's able to be here with us today. And as well as all of the proxies. I know that at the last assembly, chiefs, we're going to work towards trying to get more of our proxies to come to our meetings if we're unable to attend. So to begin our day, we will first hear from the Women's Council and our invited guests. I believe Cindy Blackstock or one of her representatives will be dialoguing with us, discussing a number of important issues like Bill C-92 and its inclusion of Jordan's Principle within the legislation, as well as the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal motion regarding self-identification when it comes to assessing Jordan's Principle programs and services. As well, just last week, the Government of Canada made a big health announcement in Winnipeg where they stated that they were committing $1.2 billion towards Jordan's Principle over the next 3 years. I also want to commend the Chiefs for their advocacy on that. I know as I had traveled that this was an initiative that we have spoken about in personal conversations, and I'm glad that your advocacy has brought forward the fruition of that announcement. Given that this initiative was started right here with the unfortunate passing of a young boy, Jordan Anderson, who is a citizen of Norway House, Cree Nation, and who died while governments fought over who should pay for his medical care. It is extremely important that Manitoba First Nations children continue to receive services without delay or disruption. And for posterity, our chiefs in assembly were the ones in 2006 that passed the resolution that called on the federal and provincial governments to implement the Child First principle in resolving intergovernmental jurisdictional disputes, and in honor of the memory of Jordan and with respect to his family and community, that his Child First principle be termed Jordan's principle and be implemented without delay. Now here we are today with a program that has been funded for the last 3 years, with Manitoba receiving a larger percentage of those funds, and money is going to every First Nation in Manitoba so that they may hire staff to work with these children and youth and families. As part of the political and technical work to lead this file, the Jordan's Principal Technical Advisory Group has been meeting regularly as a body since April 13th, 2017. The Technical Advisory Group, we call them TAG, currently includes representatives from AMC, MKO, SCO, Finism, Mfnurk. We have an ex officio from the province and one from the one federal representative, one representative from Norway House First Nation, and one independent First Nation. So in anticipation of this JP funding announcement for another 3 years, and from discussions that members of the Jordan's Principal Technical Advisory Group have been having, they felt that it's important that we move forward regionally on this matter, and that is why today we will be tabling a Jordan's Principal Strategic Plan and propose a draft of the Jordan's Principal Implementation Act for discussion. We are recommending that this initiative come under a legislative framework so that the resources will continue to flow, and not just for a year or 3, and that Jordan's Principle cannot be treated like a program, and that can end and will at the will of the government, and at the full implementation of Jordan's Principle by First Nations, for First Nations continues to guide the work of the AMC and its partners. One of these approaches to be recommended to the chiefs today is a Manitoba First Nations Jordan's Principle Equity Roundtable that we will hear more about later today. That is why the work we have been doing over the last year in health and health planning is so important, and why transformation of the way Canada does business with our First Nations needs to change drastically. The Chiefs in Assembly passed a resolution in June 2018 that mandated the AMC to scope out the jurisdictional and program authorities to be framed within a universal health accord between First Nations in Manitoba and Canada. This work is being done in collaboration with MKO, SCO, Finism, the University of Manitoba, and the Rios partners through multiple technical and political tables. Numerous workshops have been held, and tomorrow we will be talking about possible futures for health that our past leadership talked about in Wabang. So it's very important that we continue those discussions, chiefs, and I want to state again, for our own memory, I shared with you a quick story. Last year when I got invited along with our other Grand Chiefs to go to Brochet to do a headdress ceremony for the community. And I was relaying some of the work that we do here at the Assembly with the support of the Chiefs, and I was informing the community up in Brochet of our advocacy and the things that we do. And then after I spoke, there was quite an elderly gentleman that had approached me, and I believe his name was Philip Biggity, and he wanted me to tell you as Chiefs that he gives thanks. He said, you go tell the Chiefs I say thank you for continuing on the work that we started when we did Wabang. So he was a chief back in those days 50 years ago, and he wanted me to tell each and every one of you that he says thank you for the continued advocacy, because he reminded us and the people that before Wabang, our people had nothing, So we're able here to talk today about the entities we've created, about the opportunities we have, you know, with our education, our technical people, all those expertise, but all those things came from the will of the chiefs. And so I too want to thank each and every one of you for your continued work on the advocacy and continuing to build towards our future. I've gone to quite a few of our technical working groups in regards to our Universal Health Accord, and there's a lot of good work, a lot of good visioning. It's impressive that you know, when you take a look at that document Wabong that I've encouraged our chiefs to read and reread. I'm always impressed of the foresight of our grandfathers and grandmothers in those days of their vision and how they saw things, you know. And I know that in that time they didn't have the skill set that we're able to draw upon that we have today. We have all of our best and brightest that come and help us do this work, to help us guide us in the direction that we need to go, you know. Sitting in that room, we have our very own doctors from our communities, we have our own lawyers, we have our own PhDs, we have our own masters of social work. We have all of these good people that are able to help us continue guiding our road and the roads that we're building in the future. And I take pride in the fact that the reason why we're able to have those skilled people be with us to help us guide our road is a direct benefit from what our grandfathers did through Wabong, that opened those doors for us. And it's incumbent upon us to continue that work, and we will continue to move forward, and we will honor what it is we need to do for our people and for our nations. So these are very important files and discussions that we will be having, and I look forward to it. And I look forward to your continued guidance, chiefs, on these matters. Once again, I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here over the next 2 days. And as I stated earlier, despite all of your other responsibilities and the work that you do, I really do appreciate that you come here, and that the good work that you do here helps us do more for our people on the ground in our communities. So we go say, now. Thank you very much, chiefs.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone here, and just as the chiefs, I'd like to thank Elder Harry Bone for the opening prayer that he brought with us this morning, and Ernie and Dave Daniels for the pipe ceremony they conducted this morning, along with the long playing drum group who opened us up with their songs. I want to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 1 territory here. My name is Jenna Brown. I'm from Opaskwayak Cree Nation. I come from the Treaty 5 territory, so it's good to be here with you guys for these next couple of days. I'm honored to be here as your co-MC with Ryan McKay as we discuss the important issues of Jordan's Principle. So as according to our agenda, we wanted to review the agenda, but I will ask Grand Chief for direction as we have not achieved quorum yet. Okay, I'll ask Regional Chief Kevin Hart to bring opening remarks.
Morning, I'd like to acknowledge the pipe and the drum that was started off in a good way this morning with a prayer by our elders and the chiefs that were in attendance. I want to acknowledge Chief Dennis Meaches and the Long Plain First Nation for hosting us here in Treaty 1 territory, and also Grand Chief Dumas, chiefs, proxies, elders, ladies and gentlemen, good morning everybody. It's indeed an honor to be here this morning. We are discussing some very important issues, as the Grand Chief stated, you know, Jordan's Principle. When we talk about Jordan River Anderson, you know, he was born here in northern Manitoba, and this is where Jordan's Principle was actually taken on by the chiefs at the time of Norway House, then the chiefs, and then the AMC. when they brought the attention to that. But, you know, I also want to acknowledge the people that worked hard on the ground during that time, people such as Madeline Gamblin Walker and Mike Muswagon, as well as others that were there at the grassroots level that worked with the family when Jordan was with us before his passing, and that, you know, we want to hold that legacy up, and that, you know, Jordan, his lasting effect that he's had on us has been tremendous. In the last couple of years, as of March 31st of 2019, we have 46,000 Jordan's principal cases that have been approved here in Manitoba alone. Last year it amounted to roughly about $31 million. This year, Jordan's principal, through all of the approvals that were done, there's been over $57.71 million invested in the First Nation communities directly. That helps you to hire the people that operate the different programs in your respective First Nations, giving you all the necessary resources that you need in regards to Jordan's principle. And what I've seen as the national portfolio holder at the Assembly of First Nations is that Jordan's principle has taken a life of its own. What we are seeing is that it's not only in health that Jordan's principle is being activated on. We're seeing it happen in child and family services, as well as in the justice field and such, where there's been an overlap when it comes to the care and such. And this is where we're identifying that if we had the proper supports in place under Jordan's principle, you know, a lot of these kids wouldn't be involved in the justice system that we see right now because of not them having those proper supports in the communities, as well as the resources that are needed in the schools, as well as with the teachers that work with our children each and every day. So I hold them all up, everybody in the province that works at the grassroots leaders and the leadership and everybody that's fought this tireless battle, you know, for such a long time and such. And that, you know, for myself, we welcome the investments that are coming under Jordan's principle. As you know, that in Budget 2019, it was announced that $1.2 billion would continue to be implemented and invested in Jordan's principle. We know that due to the gaps in access to federal, provincial, territorial, or municipal government services provided to other children, we know that from July of 2016 to March 31st of this year, more than 218,000 requests were approved under Jordan's principle. So that goes to show the advocacy and the hard work of the chiefs and everybody that's been involved around those tables, both at the provincial levels and such, and at the national level. Our children are finally getting the supports and services that they need and deserve, but there's much more work to do, and I know that this will be discussed over today when we talk about this important issue regarding Jordan's principle. You know, we continue to push for First Nations control over the implementation of Jordan's principle because leadership have told us that this is the direction they want to move forward in. First Nations know best how to support their children and families if adequately funded. First Nations can meet the needs of our children and families rather than having to seek federal approval on requests for services and support from children under Jordan's principle. That's been relayed time and time again. And most recently, it was relayed to the minister by Grand Chief Dumas this past week when he was in Edmonton, when he talked about those very resources and that and our way forward. As we see, true reconciliation is when First Nations and Canada listens to us and supports the solutions we set out for our own children. Our ultimate goal is to meet the needs of our children and our own communities. You know, in closing, I want to acknowledge Chief Anderson and all the leadership at Norway House Cree Nation, as well as everybody else that made Jordan's principle a reality, including the leadership out there and the hard, tireless work that we have, both provincially and as well as at the national tables. And I'll have an update for you, Chiefs, in a little bit. So thank you. Miigwech Shilusani.
Thank you, Regional Chief. So next on our agenda, I'd like to call up Chief Batson from the AMC Women's Council, and she will be giving an update on her report on the child welfare legislation. Also to mention, Chiefs, there's a resolution attached to this item, but as we've not achieved quorum yet, we will come back to it once we have achieved quorum. So Chief Batson will come up and share her report, and we will continue on with the agenda.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm just stepping in for Chief Betsy Kennedy and Chief Francine Meaches, who aren't here this morning. So my name is Chief Karen Batson. I'm Chief of Pine Creek First Nation and a member of the Women's Council. So just before I start, I want to acknowledge the Treaty 1 territory on which we're on today. I want to acknowledge the elder for his prayer, acknowledge the drum group, the Grand Chiefs, and guests. So I'm pleased to be here this morning to share with you a brief update on some of the work of the AMC Women's Council. Two of our main portfolios are child welfare and Jordan's Principle. In regards to child welfare, recall at the last assembly we shared with you information on Bill C-92, an act respecting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children, youth, and families. Our position on this bill is informed by the December 2017 MOU on child welfare between Canada and AMC. Work stemming from the MOU with the full support from Canada was focused in two main areas: Manitoba-specific federal legislation and developing 5-language, nation-based template laws. This resulted in the Bringing Our Children Home Act, which the AMC Chiefs in Assembly endorsed last fall. The next step was to work with Canada to co-draft a government bill to give effect to Manitoba First Nations specific federal legislation. This did not happen. Instead, Canada introduced Bill C-92 with the AFN, the national group representing the Métis, and the national group representing the Inuit. There are a number of problems with the bill, including that First Nations in Manitoba were not consulted. It is a pan-Indigenous approach, meaning it amalgamates First Nations, Inuit, and Métis without recognizing First Nations' unique relationship with the Crown, but also their distinct political and legal rights, cultures, languages, practices, and laws. It does not respect our unique relationship with the Crown and further domesticates us under their jurisdiction. Rather, it sets out unilateral national principles that do not include First Nations' distinct political and legal rights, cultures, languages, practices, and laws. It does not restore full jurisdiction to First Nations, but domesticates First Nations jurisdiction and laws under federal legislation. Bill C-92 promotes the status quo and emboldens the position of provinces by requiring them to come up to the table through coordination agreements to negotiate First Nation rights and how First Nations will develop their own laws, and allows them to design policies and regulations. Conversely, it does not bind the provincial government, as provincial laws and standards are not required to be harmonized with First Nations' distinct rights, practices, and laws. Another issue is that there is no committed funding to the First Nations to enact their own laws. It unilaterally sets national principles as provision of child and family services based on best interest of the child, cultural continuity, and substantive equality. In your binders, you'll find a briefing note in your package on tab 2 that also refers to a resolution on Bill C-92 that was not brought to the floor at the last assembly, but will be introduced later today once we reach quorum. So the next portfolio I'll discuss is Jordan's Principle. You will also hear at this assembly about work to give effect to the Jordan's Principle Equity Roundtable. That includes some good work in unity with the organizations on the Technical Advisory Group, or TAG. As well, you will also hear about the AMC's response to self-declaration or self-identification of Indigenous ancestry for the purposes of access to Jordan's Principal services. This actually is tied to the Pan-Aboriginal, or now Pan-Indigenous approach Canada and others are taking. Of course, the Women's Council and the AMC advocated for the fact that First Nations people have a special relationship with the Crown by virtue of our treaties, and this special relationship has to be recognized and maintained. Yet, Bill C-92 with a pan-Indigenous approach puts First Nations, Inuit, and Métis into one group that offers the same legislative laws to all three groups, despite our vastly different and distinct political and legal rights, cultures, languages, practices, and laws. Further, in your binders, you have information about the National Jordan's Principle Action Table. Importantly, the Women's Council had identified that when dealing with Jordan's Principle, we should not only be repatriating or bringing our children back home that had to be put in care in order to access services, but also ensure that Jordan's Principle keeps our children out of care and that they are not voluntarily put into care just to access services they should rightly be able to receive. The AMC Chiefs in Assembly has long supported the repatriation of First Nations, and most recently has worked through the Eagle Urban Transition Centre with a family in their decision to not have to place their child in care through a voluntary placement initiatives